Recently, I've been playing through Sid Meier's Pirates, a game from 2004 that was one of my absolute favorites as a kid. Seriously, I couldn't get enough of it. So as I was playing, I realized that I have a lot of issues with the game as it exists. It's just not as good as I remember, but I still fucking love it. Even after getting over that initial nostalgia high, I found that I was still enjoying the experience immensely, and even as I'm writing the script for this video, I kinda just want to keep playing it. So why is that? The game has very clear issues, so it doesn't make sense why I'm having such a good time. So first of all, what exactly is this game all about? Well, it's a remake of the iconic 1987 game Pirates, bringing it into the realm of 3D gaming. You play as generic protagonist man. Years ago, your family was kidnapped by the evil Marquis Montalban, and yes, I'm aware I'm probably butchering the pronunciation there. You eventually sign on to a ship's crew, but the captain's a dick. You lead a mutiny and become the new captain, and for some reason the authorities are just fine with this, because you never actually get so much as a reprimand for a crime that typically came with a death sentence during that time period. From there on, you're pretty much free to do whatever, plunder ships, trade resources, attack cities. Though the overarching objective is to find your missing family and eventually avenge them, the game is very open-ended and you can basically do what you want. So let's get right into what I think didn't live up to my rose-tinted expectations. First and foremost, the game is grindy as hell. The main objective is to reunite with your family and eventually avenge them. To find your family members, you have to gather intel so you can track down the evil Baron Raimundo and fight him in both a ship battle and a duel. Afterwards, you get a piece of a map leading you to the location of one of your family members. Then, you do it all over again until you have enough of the map to find them. Then you do that again, for the other 3 family members. Yeah, a lot of this game basically boils down to, find that asshole Baron Raimundo and fight him. Again. Avenging your family is a similar process. You track down Marquis Montalban in exactly the same way, and it's worth noting that the Marquis is a much tougher opponent than Baron Raimundo. When you beat him, he'll escape, and you'll find a piece of a map to his hideout. Repeat this process until you can actually find the hideout. At that point, you'll have to engage in a raid. More on that later. Followed by one final sword fight. After which you'll have successfully avenged your family. So yeah, my main issue is that the game makes you do the exact same thing over and over again to make really any progress toward completing it. Of course, you can just ignore this entirely and play as you'd like, but I personally need to be working towards a goal when I play video games. Aimlessly screwing around gets old after a while, so I kind of feel forced to continually hunt down Baron Raimundo while constantly wishing that my character would actually just kill the motherfucker instead of letting him go every time. Furthermore, some of the minigames don't hold up super well. There's a dancing minigame, which is basically a primitive rhythm game that at higher difficulties relies almost entirely on memorization rather than reaction. There are stealth portions that are not very intuitive at all, making them much more difficult than they need to be. You also don't really need to do them so much, so you don't really get any practice, and they're very punishing if you fail, so you're discouraged from attempting them in the first place. The fencing minigame, while decent enough, requires unreasonable levels of snap reactions, particularly on higher difficulties. In particular, Marquis Montalban is actually a nearly impossible fight on the highest difficulty. Raids are essentially a turn-based grid strategy game where you command your pirates against the defending force where the goal is to either get your troops to the enemy fort or completely wipe out the defense. There are some nice bits where terrain affects things. The elevation of the land gives you an advantage in attack or defense, forestry protects you from incoming gunfire and cavalry, and you get a whopping 2 times bonus if you flank an enemy group from the side or from behind. Still, it's very primitive, largely relying on numbers advantages, and due to how limited movement is on a turn-by-turn basis, getting troops to the fort is usually not a viable strategy, so you're kinda pigeonholed into killing everything. Again, these minigames aren't bad per se, except for the stealth one, but they aren't really as robust as they could have been. So what is it that makes this game so fun, seeing as I've just been doing nothing but complaining? Well, for starters, the main gimmick, the ship combat, actually holds up extremely well. You maneuver your ship, of which there are a wide variety, and fire off shots at the enemy. You have your standard round shot, a long-range shot which primarily damages the hull and can destroy cannons. You have the medium-range chain shot which primarily damages sails. And you have the close-range grape shot which primarily damages crew. Your starting ship always starts out with all 3 types of ammo, though future ships you acquire may lack chain and grape shot. The ship combat is just so much fun, and there's actually a decent amount of preparation that can go into it. If you take a bigger ship, you'll have more guns, more max crew, and it'll usually be a bit tankier, but your mobility will suffer greatly. There are also upgrades you can obtain by visiting different ports, which can give you a big leg up. And once you've weakened your opponent enough, you can ram into the ship. If you've messed them up enough, or you have a big enough crew advantage, they'll surrender outright. Otherwise, you'll do a sword fight for the fate of both ships. Once you capture a ship, you get anything it was carrying as well as the ship itself, which you can either keep or sink. This system is the most common in the game by far, and the fact that it works so well is a large part of what keeps this game enjoyable. Even now, after an additional 16 years of developers being able to learn by example, this is still a solid combat system that holds up to modern standards. Another thing that's really nice about this game is that while the main questline is very repetitive, there's a lot of stuff to be doing and goals to work towards. The game works on a scoring system called Fame. As you accomplish things, you gain Fame points, up to a maximum of 126, though you only really need 103 for the best ending. There's also a lot of stuff you need to do to build Fame. Just rescuing your family and avenging them will only net you 26 points, though you'll actually get more of that in the process. The way you earn Fame is as follows. As you gain wealth, both in gold and in land granted by city governors, you can gain up to 24 points. As you make each of the 4 nations happy, mostly by messing with whoever they happen to be at war with, you'll rise in military rank. Reaching the maximum rank with all 4 nations grants you 32 points. There's a system where you can date the daughters of the governors via the dancing minigame, and a few quests as you gain their favor. You'll gain points throughout this entire process, and eventually you'll be able to marry the girl. Each girl also has an attractiveness level, plain, attractive, or beautiful, with the distinguishing factor being tit size. Yes, really. The more attractive the lady, the more difficult the dancing, the higher the military rank required to dance with her in the first place, and the more points she's worth upon marriage. You can gain up to 10 points this way. You can hunt down 9 other historical pirates such as Henry Morgan, Captain Kidd, and Blackbeard. Each of them is worth 1 point. The pirates also all have buried treasure. You can buy pieces of their maps from port. Each one is worth 1 point. And lastly, you can gain an additional 16 points by finding 4 lost cities from maps that are gained primarily from dancing with beautiful girls and finding family members. The sheer amount of stuff to do makes it so there's almost always something nearby. If I really don't feel like hunting down that goddamn fucking Baron Raimundo again, there's usually a pirate haven nearby, or I can try to schmooze with the ladies. Or maybe I just want to do some ship combat to garner favor for military ranks, which actually provide in-game bonuses as well as points. The objectives are varied enough that even though a large portion of your main objective is very samey, the overall experience isn't bogged down as much as it could have been. Furthermore, you're under a soft time limit to actually get as much done as possible. One of the main limiting factors is crew morale. As in-game time passes, your crew will be harder to please, eventually capping out at requiring a whopping 1,000 gold in your stockpile per crewmate. If your morale is low enough, your crew will begin to desert whenever you leave port, and if it gets bad enough for long enough, you'll actually be marooned, which really sucks, as you lose pretty much everything you have, including the flagship that you've likely spent a lot of time and money upgrading. The way to combat this is to divide the plunder at port once morale becomes unsustainable. At this point you'll lose most of your crew, all ships aside from your main ship, and you'll only be able to keep a relatively small percentage of your gold. However, the morale modifier will be completely reset. This will also make you skip several in-game months. Additionally, your character will age, and as he ages, a lot of things become more difficult. Most notably, it'll make you slower in sword fights. Furthermore, upon reaching a certain age, which can be extended moderately through various means, the next time you divide your plunder, you'll not have the option of continuing and you'll be forced to retire. This means that you want to find and avenge your family and get as much fame as possible before that happens. In particular, a lot of these tasks will be easier when you're still young, as swordfighting Baron Raimundo and Marquis Montalban are much more difficult as you grow older. I personally like this system. It gives you something to work against, and it keeps the pressure on. I understand that it's not for everyone, and I personally would have also liked it if you could basically play an endless mode that did not force you into retirement. However, in its current state, it gives a real sense of accomplishment if you manage to actually finish the game having completed everything, spending the rest of your days as a governor. I don't think that same level of accomplishment would exist if you didn't have this limit, since you could just grind it out at your leisure, which I think would be a lot more tedious than a race against the clock. Additionally, as I mentioned, this is a soft limit, not a hard limit. You never actually have to divide the plunder that final time, and if you gain wealth fast enough, you can keep up with your crew's demands. Admittedly, this is much harder if you have a large crew, but if you keep raking in the coin, you can actually continue on indefinitely, and if you slacked off earlier, you can leverage that wealth to take the time to prepare for whatever tasks lie ahead. And the last thing that I think really works in this game's favor is something that I can't even attribute to it directly. For whatever reason, good pirate games are few and far between. It's kinda weird when you think about it. The pirate setting has a whole lot of potential for incredible gameplay, but only a handful of games have ever really capitalized on it. I mean, aside from this game, there's mostly just Sea of Thieves and, interestingly enough, Assassin's Creed 4 and Rogue, which by the way do probably have the best naval combat system I've ever played. There are other piratey games, but none of them really blew me out of the water, which I just don't understand. This lack of competition allows for Sid Meier's Pirates, already a decent enough game in its own right, to flourish as one of the best games of its genre and setting. It's not hard to stand out when there's nobody else seeking the limelight. Hopefully that'll change in the future. I think it's high time for another single-player, pure pirate experience. I mean, Assassin's Creed did a pretty good job of pirating, but I'm ready for a game that's just about pirates. Sid Meier's Pirates is not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, and yet, I loved it as a kid and I still love it today, 16 years later. It's a ton of fun and I'm glad to have rediscovered it. Despite its flaws, it still stands as one of the greatest pirate games in history, and quite frankly, not enough people have played it. If you've never played it, I'd highly recommend it. It's got issues, but it's a great experience. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I upload every Monday, so make sure to check back in next week. Follow me on Twitter at AdsTweets for updates and memes, and follow me on Twitch at AdsGames, where I like to stream my editing sessions for these videos. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next Monday.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no